Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I've been working on a lot of things on the channel in the background, trying to get the audio and stuff set up, but let's move into the meat and potatoes of this episode. We are talking tier maker for Mechabellum. So, a couple of preferences to this. This tier list is based off of tier 1 units with the available upgrades, i.e. you have 4 upgrades, you can unlock more throughout your tech points and things, but this is just looking how units base off of each other at tier 1. All of these units can perform very well depending on the situation. The way that I'm looking at this is how well do those units perform in most situations and throughout the entire game. For instance, does a unit of Stormcallers continue to perform well in round 1 versus round 12? So just keep that in mind. Also, there are going to be some units that are near a level above or a level below. I will organize the tier list as we continue through it. That way you'll see, let's say S tier, the one closest to S is the one that is the best, whereas the one furthest away from S is the worst of S tier. So this is going to be based off of the 0.7.5 patch. As the game continues to grow, I'll probably do a tier list for every major release. So coming off of the tournaments of the weekend, we have Arclights. Arclights actually saw quite a bit of play, and I'm going to place them in A. Arclights have a lot of versatility. They can do a lot of damage as the game continues to progress. You don't regret having Arclights. They can be used to shut down a lot of aggression, i.e. if the enemy player is going with a lot of hordes, he's trying to do a lot of flanks, Arclights perform exceedingly well. They are slow, but if you know how to place them, and they do have some very good upgrades available to them, they will continue to perform throughout the game. They can shoot up with an upgrade, meaning that they can take care of pesky wasps, phoenixes, and with some damage upgrades, even overlords. So level 1 upgrades, A tier. S are units that you should always get / perform exceedingly well. A are good units that perform well throughout the game. B units are okay units but are somewhat more situational. C are generally very situational units that perform either a single function really well or can be used for quick strategy changes. And of course, D is units that you probably should avoid unless in very key situations. Moving on, we have Steel Balls. Steel Ball, I'm also going to put in the B tier. They're good. Steel Balls are good, and I like to see them in my early card picks. That's when you start the game. You can grab something like an Aerial Specialist with some Mustang and Steel Ball, and then you can add a unit of Phoenix or Wasps or something. Steel Balls are just good. They deal with giant units pretty well. They deal with heavily armored units pretty well. They can take out single entities exceedingly well, and they're very good at going after the command center and research station. They can melt those things away very quickly, and they can take a lot of damage. So they actually hold up fairly well against hordes. They will get overwhelmed by a lot of crawlers or upgraded Fang, but they do hold up fairly well in most cases. They're a little bit tied in to only being able to shoot the ground, and they don't perform well against units with a lot of range or high DPS. So Steel Balls, they're okay. They'll perform throughout the game. You can rely on them. You can even make them the backbone of your army if necessary. Crawlers, our first addition into S tier. You almost always will see a unit of crawlers throughout the game on both sides, and that's a clear indication of the purpose that they serve. They're fast, there's a lot of them, they're very easy to maneuver around, they're very easy to upgrade, and they fill in the role of a chaff unit. What this crawler really can be an ultra-aggressive unit that you build your army around and can win you the game. They can be a distraction unit placed onto the flanks to get rid of an Overlord from shooting the main army or drawing away a large unit of Mustang, just something to delay the enemy. They serve that purpose exceedingly well. And they can also be great distractions for your main line, meaning if the enemy has a lot of tanks, if they have a lot of snipers, phoenixes, melting points, things that normally focus on single entities or don't have a huge amount of AoE, crawlers can absorb a lot of damage for your team and then allow your guys to do the DPS that they can do. Crawlers are phenomenal. We see them on every single game. They deserve an S tier. In fact, they're probably going to stay in this position. Coming up next are Fang. Fang are like worse crawlers. I'm tempted to put them, I'm going to put them in B tier, but they do heavily sit towards C. Fang just don't deal a lot of damage at level 1. Don't get me wrong, remember this tier list is all about level 1 as soon as they come onto the field. Of course, they can be situationally good. I'm putting them in B tier because they are okay. You have slower units and you have faster units. Fang are very much meant to accompany your slower units into battle, give them a shielding. They do have range, which I do rate very highly. They can shoot up, so they can actually get rid of a unit of Phoenix. They can deal decent damage against a unit of Wasp. The problem is that they're just slow. Their range isn't very good at the beginning. They're very fragile. I would not rate them any higher than B at tier 1, but they do serve a purpose and they can perform throughout the game. They get outperformed in some features, but Fang, they're okay. They're good boys. Fortress. Fortress is our first D-list unit, and I've seen this quite a few in other tiers, but you know what? They kind of deserve it. They're very expensive, coming in at $200 to unlock, plus another $400 on top of that. They're slow, they don't have a lot of range, their upgrades are mediocre. They can eventually shoot up with an air barrage that doesn't really do that much damage. It's more useful against things like Wasps, really, but sometimes they just miss, even with an anti-air barrage. It's surprising. They have a ton of health, they pack a wallop, but their range is too low, they're too slow, and they're often gunned down before making a significant difference. I have seen it, and we have seen it in tournaments, where people will go for the rumbling, where all of a sudden you have 4 fortresses on the field with barrier. That can make a significant difference, of course. However, that's a huge investment. It's very much a coin flip whether you win or lose, and it is somewhat easily countered depending on the stage of the game. Hackers. Man, I just played 2 matches against opponents that deployed hackers, and I won both of them really easily. And unfortunately, I think that solidifies it. They're better than fortresses, but you know, the hackers gotta go in D. It's a coin flip. Either the hacker works out and you're in a really good spot and things continue forward from there, or the hacker dies turn 1, it never gets an upgrade, it just continues to suffer throughout the game, and it doesn't do anything for your army. They're really bad against hordes. They actually perform best against medium tier units, i.e. medium health, medium expense, so things like sledgehammers, things like Rhino, Mustangs, kind of meh. So, and marksmen, actually, they do perform very well against marksmen if they're able to get into range of them. But I think hackers are just kind of a fun unit that fill a niche, and if that niche is open, you can go for it, but it's very easy to close that door. Unfortunately, I just don't think they do very well. You can have one in your army just for funsies. They're not a huge investment, and that's why I rate them more than the fortress, because they don't cost as much. Marksmen. Marksmen are making their way right up here to S tier. I do think they're slightly worse than crawlers, only because their rate of fire is a little slow, but they are one of the best long-ranged damage dealers in the game. It's always a good idea to have a couple units of marksmen. They have some really good upgrades on them. They're able to deal with shields, they're able to deal with arc lights, they're able to deal with tanks. Of course, they suffer against hordes, but overall, a very good unit, very versatile. You'll almost always see a couple of marksmen on the board for both players. And if it's any indication to you when you're playing this game, or any games like it, whatever most people are taking generally perform very well. Melting Point. Melting Points are going in A. Melting Points are phenomenal units. They're great at clearing out giants. They can be good at clearing out hordes. They are very expensive, but they have a pretty decent range. They have great DPS, and they're able to perform a role that most other units aren't, which is the versatile giant. Most giant units do one thing, and they do it fairly well. Arclight not only kills giants, but it can also get rid of other units pretty easily, and counters some medium tier units quite well. Things like rhinos, things like steel balls, they actually perform fairly well against. So Melting Point, pretty dang good unit. Mustangs. Mustangs are going to be setting right here in B, and I'm actually going to put them in front of steel balls. And the reason why I do this is that they can shoot up and down. They have pretty darn good range. They can get extra range upgrades. They can deal with aerial units, and they can deal with missile firing units, meaning that they can even deal with stormcallers and other ground units. They have moderately good DPS. They're quick, and they can be used as very interesting flanking units. It's an investment, though, at 200 points. One of the things that Mustangs do suffer from, though, is that they really work best as a cohesive unit. And given that there's quite a few models in the unit, they're more prone to splitting, which if you split a unit that already doesn't do much DPS per model, actually I should say that their DPS is pretty good, their just damage isn't very good. So when you split, let's say, half the unit to go fight 2 units, they'll almost always lose. And that's not good. Their drop-off rate is really, really heavy. So Mustangs really suffer from losing even just a quarter of their unit. It makes a significant loss for them. Overlords. Overlords are really fun. I do love a good Overlord. The mama ship, spawning out more wasps and things. I'm going to have to give it a C, though. And I'm even going to put it slightly... I'm going to put it here. The reason I say that is that Overlords are great, but they do have some pretty hard counters. We've seen recently in some tournaments, Mass Overlord, which can work, but the Overlords need a lot of upgrades and they need a lot of tech in order to perform consistently well. Against other tier 1 units of their class, of course they're going to perform very well. They're a giant unit. They cost 4 times as much as some of the others on this list. However, versatility-wise, they do kind of start to fall off, especially against units like Mustang, like Marksman, like even Arclights can deal with them somewhat well as the game continues. So I'm just going to give them a B. They're moderate to good. They'll perform as the game continues, but they can be a dangerous investment. Phoenix, baby! Phoenix are getting an A. Remember, this is my tier list. I know quite a few people might not agree with this, but a couple units of Phoenix can continue to perform throughout the game, just slowly racking up kills. They're really bad against hordes, but they do come with a lot of versatility, and even just having 2 or 3 of them on the field can push your enemy to choose some units that he might not want at this point. Unfortunately, one of the best counters for Phoenix are Marksmen, and Marksmen are one of the best units in the game, so it is a bit of a double-edged sword. If you pick up a couple of Phoenix and next round he picks up or she picks up a unit of Marksman, you may have just forced them to get a better unit than yours. Even if that transition doesn't work very well for their team comp, Marksmen just perform well. So keep that in mind with the Phoenix. They're great. They hit very hard. They can get extra range. They can respawn. They can get shields. They can deal with things like Overlords and Fortresses and other giant units very well. So Phoenix, generally pretty good, and they're quick. You gotta love it when they can push up and down the field very well, and they can redeploy. Rhinos, baby! Rhinos are coming right up here into A tier. The Rhino cheese is strong and powerful. They're just tough units with some great upgrades, especially most recently we're seeing a lot of the final Blitz unit upgrade on these level 1 Rhinos just to deal a ton of damage in an AoE. And this is one of the reasons why I don't rate steel balls as well. Recently we've seen a lot of steel balls used as counters to Rhinos. The steel balls without a range upgrade just all gather around the Rhino. The Rhino walks into them, they kill it, it kills them, it's a wash, but sometimes that Rhino also takes a couple of friendly units or enemy units with it. That could be other Fang that were accompanying the steel ball, Mustangs, just something. Or the Rhino could be told, hey, run straight at the tower. It runs straight at the tower, it dies, and it takes out the tower. Phenomenal. Rhinos are one of the most powerful units in the game right now, but they do have some pretty easy counters, and they can be kited quite well. So Rhinos, very, very good unit. They will continue to perform, but every once in a while it will feel like they're just hard countered. So something to think about. Tanks. Tanks are really seeing a lot more options here. I'm going to put them slightly above both the steel balls and the Fang. The reason for this is that we've seen them perform very well recently in a lot of the tournaments, turning themselves into basically long-range, harder-hitting, tankier snipers. It does take a while to get going, and at level 1, they don't perform nearly as well. They're good against hordes, they're good against other armored units, single-entity units, such as an Arclight. They're mediocre against medium single entity units like a Rhino. They don't perform as well against steel balls, but just having the range makes them a little bit more versatile. They're easier to back up than it is something like a steel ball because they are slower, and unfortunately they don't shoot up. So they're going to stay in B. They'll continue to perform throughout the game if you spawn with a couple of them. They're probably not going to be the backbone of your army, but they have the ability to transition into it, so not bad. Stormcallers. Man, Stormcallers sit in a really tough position. I'm going to have to put them right here in B tier, and we have quite a few units that are balanced quite well, which is what you want. You have a couple units, or quite a few units in B tier. They can perform. They can just make steady damage over time, picking off snipers in the back line, damaging tanks, hurting units of Fang, slowly crippling things like Vulcans and other slow-moving units like the Fortress, dealing damage to mind control units. Just having that reach can make a big difference. Unfortunately, they are shut down by Mustangs hard if they do get the missile interception, and that can be an issue. They do have a little bit of problem with the reload rates and also the missile travel time. I'd like to have changed ever so slightly to make those missiles just a little bit quicker, because it's very common for them to miss, and players are aware of this. We saw a lot of crawlers, one of our S tier units, get directions from the tower just to run back and forth, and that means the Stormcallers will just spend the entire game shooting at a unit of crawlers and never hitting it. So really great against slow units, terrible against any kind of fast unit, and that's about that. They perform well. They have some very good upgrades. They're a B. Vulcan. I kept debating in my mind about the Vulcan. It fills what it needs to do so well. It is such a good anti-horde, anti-chaff, damage-soaking unit, but that's all it does. So I was very much debating about these two. I'm actually going to give it an A, just because when you need a Vulcan, it is the exact answer you need. It's never like oh, I could get Mustang, and then I could fill in some crawlers, and I'd back them up with some snipers. It's just, oh, this guy's got like 3 units of crawlers on my left flank. Bam! Pop a Vulcan, all the crawlers disappear. Very, very good unit. They perform pretty well at rank 1. Of course, they're a giant unit. Most giant units perform very well at rank 1, besides perhaps the Fortress. Just because they have a ton of HP, their damage is pretty good for what it needs to be. They've got a good amount of splash range. They have some very interesting upgrades, and they deal with a myriad of situations. Specifically hordes, but you know what? They actually perform fairly well against tanks. They can drop down aerial denial. They can spawn in units. So overall, the Vulcan, pretty darn good unit. I wouldn't say he's as good as some of these others. I'd actually rate him a little bit higher than the Phoenix, perhaps, just because he fills the role that the Phoenix is trying to do a little bit better. He's really unique. The most that I would say is close to him is maybe a Stormcaller or Mustang with the splash damage upgrade, but he just does his job so well. He's getting an A. Our last unit, the only one in C tier, unfortunately, is my friendly little Wasp. Wasps actually played exceedingly well in the Asian tournament recently, and they were really used as a gotcha. The enemy units didn't shoot up. We saw quite a few Wasps come out. They may have gotten the redeployment upgrade, and they just went hog wild for a round or two because they could. However, they don't perform exceedingly well as the game progresses unless you invest so heavily into them. They have a lot of support. They have a lot of upgrades. They're just a unit that needs a lot to really get going. But as the surprise, as the chaff of the air, they actually do quite well. They perform well against most sniper units. They perform well against, of course, any unit that can't shoot up. But they also allow the Mothership or the Overlord to perform quite well as it continues to spawn out Wasps. So Wasps, pretty darn good. Anyways, that was my little tier list. Let me know what you think in the comments. I promise the videos will continue to get better and better, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye.